Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that nearly 500 pioneers left Iowa City with handcarts that weighed 400 to 500 pounds, crossed hot prairies, rough mountain trails, and dusty roads? Learn how this first Latter-day Saint handcart company pulled and pushed their handcarts into the Salt Lake Valley while dealing with broken axles, difficult terrain, exhaustion, and loss. Discover how their journey tested their courage and became a powerful story of faith, sacrifice, and perseverance.
I want you to just picture something for a second. Replace your car with a wooden cart.
Right.
And then load it with 500 pounds of absolutely everything you own to survive.
Yeah, everything.
Now start walking, like for 1,000 miles.
It sounds impossible, honestly.
It really does. You know, when we think about epic road trips today, the biggest crisis you face is usually, I don't know, the air conditioning going out.
Right, or getting a flat tire on the interstate.
Exactly, and then having to sit on the shoulder for 2 hours waiting for a tow truck. We are just completely insulated from the physical geography we're crossing.
Oh, totally insulated.
But today, we are doing a custom deep dive into the sheer, terrifying physical reality of a journey where that insulation just did not exist at all.
Yeah, it was a completely different world.
And we're drawing entirely from the text, The Handcart Pioneers, a rite of passage to Zion, to really understand this staggering feat of human endurance from the mid-19th century.
It's just a fascinating piece of history.
It really is. We are looking at the physical reality, the mechanical challenges, and the unbelievable grit of the people who walked across the American continent, basically acting as their own draft animals.
Yeah, to really grasp the magnitude of this, we have to look at the world of 1856.
Okay, let's unpack this, because you have this overarching monumental goal, right?
Right. At this time, you have these poor European converts who are answering this deeply felt religious call to gather in what they called Zion.
Which was the Salt Lake Valley in Utah.
Exactly. They are crossing the Atlantic. They're making their way to the frontier in Iowa, fully expecting to join a standard wagon train.
Like the ones we always see in the movies.
Right, exactly. But a massive crisis was brewing back in the States. The sheer volume of people answering this call, well, it collided with a pretty harsh economic reality.
So the organizers are suddenly faced with an immediate logistical nightmare. You have all these eager converts standing on the edge of the frontier, but no obvious way to physically transport them.
It really came down to pure economics and honestly bad harvests.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In 1856, severe agricultural shortages meant the church had extremely limited funds.
Wow. Okay.
And the standard expected way to travel across the plains was in heavy covered wagons pulled by teams of oxen.
Which I'm guessing was not cheap.
Not at all. That requires significant capital. You have to buy the animals, buy the wagons, secure the feed.
Right.
The organizers basically looked at their ledgers and realized they simply could not afford to provide traditional transportation for this huge wave of incoming immigrants.
The money just wasn't there.
It just wasn't there.
So necessity forces innovation, obviously. But this particular innovation sounds almost like a punishment.
It does sound like that today.
Because President Brigham Young proposes this cost-saving solution, right? Two-wheeled handcarts. Wait, he just told them to walk and pull their own luggage?
That's exactly what he did.
Surely there was massive pushback to that. I mean, how do you convince thousands of people to just become their own pack animals?
Well, the text gives Brigham Young's actual directive, and it is pretty uncompromising.
What did he say?
He said, let them come on foot with handcarts or wheelbarrows, let them gird up their loins and walk through, and nothing shall hinder or stay them.
Wow, nothing shall hinder them.
Right. And you have to remember, the religious conviction of these pioneers really cannot be overstated.
So they didn't just see it as like a cheap travel option.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
They viewed this not just as a migration, but as a spiritual mandate.
Oh, I see.
When the leader of their faith issued that directive, they saw it as a prophetic solution to an impossible problem.
That makes a lot of sense.
So on June 9, 1856, nearly 500 pioneers left Iowa City.
500 people on foot.
Yeah. They became the very first Latter-day Saint handcart company, committing to travel more than 1,000 miles entirely under their own power.
Let's break down the physical specifications of these machines.
Oh, we definitely should.
Because when you hear handcart, it is so easy to just picture a little wheelbarrow you use in your garden on a Sunday afternoon.
Right, like a little yard cart.
Yeah, but these were heavy-duty transport vehicles loaded with maximum weights of 400 to 500 pounds.
They were massive.
And they had this thick wooden axle that was 5 feet wide with wheels 21 inches in diameter.
Huge wheels.
So think of a wheelbarrow, but instead of one wheel in the front, you have an axle in the middle.
Yeah, which changes everything about how you move it.
Right. You aren't just pulling, you are constantly fighting to balance a 500-pound seesaw.
Exactly.
While simultaneously dragging it over rocks and through mud and up mountains. It's like dragging a grand piano across the country.
That is a perfect analogy.
Sure.
The physics of moving a 500-pound static load on those 21-inch wheels requires a complete mobilization of the family unit.
You need constant, sustained torque just to overcome the initial friction.
You really do. And each family was assigned one handcart.
So how did they divide the labor?
Well, the mother, the father, and the older children would take turns at the front,
Right.
gripping the wooden shafts and physically leaning forward to pull the load. And then the younger children were stationed at the back of the cart, just leaning their whole bodies into the wood, pushing from behind.
Pushing from behind. I mean, you are fighting inertia every single second of the day.
Every single step.
A 500-pound cart resting in the dirt just wants to stay in the dirt.
Exactly.
So you basically have a family acting as a human engine.
Yes.
But having a family act as an engine only works on a flat, smooth surface.
Right.
What happens when that wooden machine hits the reality of the Rocky Mountains?
That is where things get really grim.
Because you start out leaving Iowa City, and maybe there is like a sense of optimism on the smooth prairies, but the American West is just an incredibly unforgiving environment.
It is. The environmental transition brutally exposed the mechanical vulnerability of Brigham Young's solution.
Oh, the all-wood construction.
Yeah, these first hand carts were entirely wood. You have wooden wheels spinning on wooden axles.
Which sounds like a recipe for disaster.
In a temperate climate, that might hold up for a while. But the intense, dry heat of the high plains literally baked the ambient moisture right out of the wood.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about the humidity or the lack of it.
Right, so the axles began to shrink, they'd crack, and splinter under that 500-pound pressure.
And then add the dust to that equation.
Oh, the dust was horrible.
You have dirt and fine sand blowing constantly across the plains.
Yep.
And when sand gets between two moving wooden parts, like a spinning wheel hub and a dry wooden axle, it acts as heavy grit sandpaper.
That's exactly what happened.
With every single rotation of those 21-inch wheels, the sand is grinding down the axle, shaving the wood thinner and thinner.
What's fascinating here is how quickly mechanical failure translated into a devastating human toll.
Because if your car breaks down today, you call a tow truck.
Right, but when an axle snapped out there, the Pioneer family didn't have the luxury of just stopping to rest.
They were on a strict timeline, right?
Exactly. The entire company is on a strict schedule, racing against the coming winter.
So a broken cart just meant more work.
Yeah, it meant the pioneers had to exhaust themselves even further, attempting these crude repairs with whatever scraps of wood or rawhide they could find.
Or just dragging the broken equipment.
Right. The caloric deficit was massive.
I can't even imagine the calories they were burning.
They were burning thousands of calories, hauling this weight over uneven terrain,
Right.
while surviving on severely rationed flour and, whatever game they could hunt.
The sources share a really harrowing detail from a British immigrant and carpenter on the trail.
Yes, that part is incredibly tough to read.
It is. Over the span of just a few days, he had to physically build 3 coffins for members of his company who had died from exhaustion and exposure.
Oh, devastating.
Imagine the psychological weight of that. You're starving. You have just pulled a 500-pound cart for 15 miles.
Yeah.
Your muscles are literally screaming, and instead of resting by the fire, you have to go find spare wood and build coffins for your friends.
It really highlights how utterly exposed they were to the immediate consequences of their environment.
Exposed is the right word.
It was a razor-thin margin of survival. But to understand the full scope of the handcart era, we have to look at the broader 4-year period from 1856 to 1860.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit.
Because a total of 10 handcart companies actually crossed the plains into Utah.
10 companies.
Yeah, and out of the roughly 3,000 pioneers who made this trek, the vast majority actually survived.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the narrative of the handcarts is almost always dominated by the horrific tragedies of the Willie and Martin companies.
Right, they're the most famous.
The text notes those two companies alone lost over 220 members.
It was a massive tragedy.
But the other 8 companies combined only suffered a loss of about 55 people.
Yes, a huge difference.
Wait, so if 8 companies survived with an incredibly low mortality rate for a 19th century overland crossing, what happened to those 2?
That's the big question.
Why did the Willie and Martin companies suffer such a catastrophic loss of life compared to everyone else?
The tragedy of the Willie and Martin companies was primarily a failure of timing,
Timing, okay.
which compounded all those other vulnerabilities we just discussed.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike the earlier companies that left in June, the Willie and Martin groups didn't leave Iowa until mid-August.
Oh no, so they're starting way too late.
They were desperately racing the calendar.
Right.
And by October, while they were still exposed in the high elevations of Wyoming, they were hit by severe early winter blizzards.
So they are trapped in sub-zero temperatures.
Yeah.
Freezing in deep snow, pulling carts that are already basically falling apart.
They simply ran out of time and were swallowed by the weather.
That is just terrifying.
It was a catastrophic intersection of delayed departure, mechanical vulnerability, and freak weather.
A perfect storm.
Exactly. But the leadership in Salt Lake City learned a brutal lesson from that season.
I would hope so.
This raises an important question about human resilience and technological adaptation.
How so?
Well, the high survival rate in the later companies was driven by rapid, vital engineering changes.
They realized the carts were flawed.
Right. They recognized the fatal flaw of the wood-on-wood friction. So the smooth, splintering wooden axles were replaced with improved iron axles.
Oh, wow. That one change fundamentally alters the friction coefficient of the entire cart.
It completely changes it.
Because iron doesn't splinter when the moisture is baked out of it by the desert sun.
Exactly.
And iron doesn't get sanded down to a toothpick by blowing dirt.
Nope.
You still have the immense weight, obviously, and you still have to walk 1,000 miles, but suddenly the machine itself is reliable.
The machine stopped being the enemy.
Right.
They adapted the technology and successfully turned a desperate economic gamble into a functional, highly efficient migration system.
That's incredible.
And you can see the absolute peak of that success a couple of years later in 1858 with the John Berry Company.
Okay. The John Berry Company. This was the largest company to travel by handcart.
It was.
But what really stands out in the text is the demographic of this group. It was mostly composed of missionaries returning from the British mission.
Yes.
These were Mormon elders who had been sent to the United Kingdom to preach and gather converts, and now they were making this massive trek back home to Utah.
Right.
So we aren't talking about vulnerable families with toddlers pushing from behind anymore.
Not at all.
We are talking about seasoned, hardened adults.
Exactly. And their journey back intersected with a highly volatile geopolitical event.
Oh, the Utah War.
Yes, the Utah War of 1857 to 1858.
Right, because tensions between the federal government and the Latter-day Saints had basically reached a boiling point.
They had. And President James Buchanan had ordered thousands of U.S. troops to march to Utah to enforce federal authority and replace Brigham Young as governor.
I love the visual the source paints here.
It's a great scene.
Because you have this incredibly tense military standoff happening out on the plains.
Yeah.
You have a company of U.S. soldiers who are out there building bridges and repairing roads to supply this approaching army.
Right.
And they are heavily armed, fully supplied, professional military men relying on massive logistical supply chains.
Oh, absolutely.
And suddenly they have to pause their construction work, staring in absolute shock as a group of dust-covered, exhausted missionaries push these massive handcarts right past them.
The contrast is just striking.
It's like a movie scene.
It really is.
Yeah.
The soldiers are witnessing a group of people functioning as their own pack animals, completely bypassing traditional military logistics.
And the returning elders recorded the soldiers' reactions in their journals, didn't they?
They did. They noted, and this is the quote, "They all looked quite amazed at seeing us pass them as bold as lions."
As bold as lions. That phrase perfectly captures the transformation.
It really does.
They started as vulnerable travelers subject to the whims of the weather, but surviving the crucible of the plains turned them into formidable survivors.
Absolutely. Pushing a 500-pound cart day after day hardens you.
They were no longer victims of the trail, they had mastered it.
The trail forged an incredibly resilient community. But, technological progress is relentless.
It always is.
The handcart season, while deeply impactful, was actually quite brief.
Really? When did it end?
The last handcart company arrived in 1860.
Oh, wow. So only 4 years.
Yeah, just 4 years. The broader pioneer era involving wagon trains continued a bit longer, but a massive paradigm shift was laying tracks across the country.
Ah, the Transcontinental Railroad.
Exactly.
Because after 1868, the grueling physical reality of walking across the plains became entirely obsolete.
Right. Pioneers began traveling across America on the rails.
And the text gives us a very specific, poignant date for this, October 24th, 1868.
A huge milestone.
On that day, a man named Fred C. Anderson arrived in Salt Lake City with wagons transporting 60 European converts.
Yeah.
And that specific arrival officially marked the final gasp of pioneer travel along the Mormon Trail. After that, you just bought a train ticket.
The physical journey was reduced from months of grueling labor to days of relatively passive travel.
So what does this all mean?
That's the real question.
We have this incredibly brief window of history. I mean, the handcarts only ran from 1856 to 1860, and the entire walking pioneer era closed by 1868.
Right, it's a blink of an eye historically.
It is a tiny fraction of the American story. How should we contextualize this intense period of suffering and mechanical adaptation and triumph?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look beyond the mechanics of iron axles and the daily mileage.
Okay, look deeper.
Because the journey did something to the people who survived it. The historian Wallace Stegner summarized the psychological and cultural impact beautifully.
What did he say?
He observed that for every early saint, crossing the plains to Zion and the valleys of the mountains was not merely a journey, but a rite of passage, the final, devoted, enduring act that brought one into the kingdom.
A rite of passage.
Yes.
It wasn't just a commute to a new zip code. It was a physical transformation that created this ironclad community identity.
Precisely.
To recap the staggering journey we've tracked today, we started with the economic crisis of 1856 that led to that audacious directive to pull 500-pound wooden axle carts all the way from Iowa City.
Right.
We explored the brutal mechanics of wood friction, the psychological toll of burying friends on the trail, and the specific timing and weather disaster that caused the Willie and Martin tragedies.
A lot of hardship.
So much hardship. But then we saw the engineering iteration of iron axles that saved later companies, leading to the triumphant moment of the John Berry missionaries marching past U.S. soldiers like lions.
Which is my favorite part.
It is such a good moment. And finally, we saw the ultimate obsolescence of the trail in 1868 with the arrival of the railroad.
It's a profound testament to the limits of human endurance and the capacity to literally pull one's own salvation across a hostile continent.
And for you listening, think about how profoundly insulated we are today from the physical landscape.
It's so true.
We complain when a flight is delayed by 2 hours. But it is worth remembering the immense physical sacrifices made by those who walked every single inch of the ground we now just fly right over.
They really did pave the way.
Paving the way for all the modern conveniences we completely take for granted today. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
And think about that exact moment in 1868 when the railroad took over.
Yeah.
For years, arriving in the Salt Lake Valley required a shared, grueling physical sacrifice.
1,000 miles of walking.
The 1,000-mile struggle bonded the community together in a way few other experiences could.
Absolutely.
So when that monumental trial was suddenly replaced by a relatively comfortable train ticket, what happens to that shared identity? Does an easier journey fundamentally change what it means to finally arrive at your destination?
Thank you for joining us for this day in his story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in his story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.